Hello and welcome to the Jumpstart podcast with Jeffalytics. I'm your host, Jeff Sauer. Today, for our 5th episode, we talk with SEO pro Cyrus Shepard, who's the Director of Audience Development with Moz. I'm recording the introduction to this episode from London, where I'm about to speak at 2 conferences in the same day, just a few hours apart. The first one is Hero Conference in West London, and then in the afternoon I'll be speaking at eMetrics in East London. This has been my first speaking gig and really my first time being professional in general since I started the Digital Nomad just 4 months ago. So it's really been fun to speak with people in person for the first time in a while, talk to some peers, and I even managed to line up a few podcast guests during hallway conversations and dinners. So it's been nice. It's been very effective for me along the way. It's funny because whenever I worry about running out of guests for the podcast, I think about all the great marketers that are out there and realize that I'll probably never have to worry about reaching that plateau and running out of guests. But it's also funny that I was talking to my friend Simo Ahava just a few minutes ago, actually, and he said that I should interview myself for the podcast. And I said, okay, well, if I make it to 100 episodes, I will hold a contest where a listener can interview me. And he said, do you really think you're going to make it to 100 people for this podcast? Are you going to run out of marketers? No way. And I was like, actually, I do think that I'm never going to run out of guests because there's so many great marketers out there, and it really won't be a problem to reach that point. So I think we could do several hundred episodes with this weekly format. And so what do you think? Do you think we're going to run out of guests? Do you think that you want to be a guest? Would you want to interview me? Go ahead and leave a comment and be heard. Now, a word from our sponsor. So last night I was having a conversation about the difference between PPC with paid search and then doing social advertising. And somebody made an analogy for me, and that is that Google search is like fishing in a river and Facebook advertising is like fishing in a pond. And so when you think about it, fishing in a pond, you get the same fish. There's a finite list of fish in the pond, and you're just really trying to reel them in and going after them over and over again. Whereas fishing in a river means that you will constantly have a new stream of fish coming in, but you just have to learn how to catch them. So it's probably more difficult to catch fish in a river, but you always have a new stream coming in. So my question to you is, do you want to learn how to catch new customers from that Google River? Then you should sign up for PPC course, where I prepare you to catch so many fish that you'll feed your family for years to come. So join me at ppccourse.net to reel in more customers. While I'm at it, do you love this podcast? Then please do leave a review for me on iTunes. That's really how people can discover this podcast. I want to get as many people to discover it as possible, and it's through people like you that make that possible for me. So please do leave a review in iTunes. All right, now let's get on to the main event with Cyrus Shepard. We recorded this episode all the way back in September when I was traveling in New Zealand. I decided to space things out a bit with Cyrus because I had just interviewed Rand Fishkin from Moz, and since Cyrus works at Moz, I wanted to give a little bit of space there. You'll notice right away that in this interview, I took almost 60 seconds to allow Cyrus to speak, and that's just through the magic of editing. It actually took me more like 90 seconds to even get to the point where he could talk, and so I'm working on it. Cyrus is a good sport, and we ended up having a great conversation, but I'm definitely working on my interview skills as well as I go through this. But in the end, we really built off of each other's energy, had a lot of really good conversation going back and forth. And it's just so interesting to hear how Cyrus came about doing these things. And another thing that's really interesting to me is that these are 2 colleagues that I've interviewed now. We talked about Rand. You listened to that podcast, right? You listened to the Rand podcast, and now it's time for Cyrus. Their journeys are very similar, and they're also extremely different at the same time. And so when you look at these 2 people, they're at the same company. They held the same job at some point in time when it's SEO for SEO Moz, but really different ways of getting there. So I really admire Cyrus because he saw something that he wanted and he made it happen. I respect hustle. I'm a hustler myself. I love that it took Cyrus nearly 30 jobs to get into internet marketing. And I also love the fact that when he did get into internet marketing, he had one of the best jobs out there and really had a really cool rise. And he's going to share that story with you. So make sure you listen along. And so let's hear it from Cyrus. Go to jeffalytics.com/Cyrus for our show notes and to get more information about future episodes. Cyrus, it's really nice to have you on the podcast, and really want to get to know about you and how did you take this journey from farm laborer, telemarketer, convenience store clerk, all the way to becoming one of the foremost SEOs, in my opinion, and one of the ones that I really follow and I learned from. And so I want to talk about that journey. But first, let's start with the early life. Give me a little bit of a background into how you got started in in your career in general. Like, I looked at the list of jobs that you put on Twitter a couple months ago, and it's fascinating to me to see how you, and I'll put this in the podcast notes, but you started as a farm laborer down in Iowa, and I say down in Iowa because I'm from Minnesota, and all the way to director of audience development. And so maybe give a little background into how you got started in your work life and some of the things you had to do in order to get there.
Well, first of all, Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I'm a fan of Jeffalytics, your newsletter. I tell everybody to subscribe to. I'm a big fan of yours, so happy to be here. I got my start in marketing in a very bad way, and I hated it. My first job in marketing, and they called it a marketing job, I was 18 years old, and I was supposed to call people in my hometown and sell them coupon books. And it was horrible. It was horrible telemarketing. Nobody wanted these coupon books. I could only convince little old ladies to part with their money if they were lonely and wanted someone to talk to. And I hated it. I stayed at that job for 3 days before I quit. And I never wanted to do anything. And I associated marketing with sales. And that was a big problem. Now, my father was a car salesman. He was really good at it, but I just wanted to get out of the business of trying to sell things to people. And that's how I viewed marketing for years and years and years. And I never wanted to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty common thing. I've noticed that a lot of people who go to school for marketing, they'll end up doing promotions. So like you said, telemarketing is one thing, and then also handing out samples and things like that. And that's what a lot of people, their impression at first is of what marketing is. And I think that's a little bit different than what we set out to do as marketers in our careers.
Yep. And then I had a very long, winding road of many, many jobs. I actually went to film school in Southern California. Wanted to be a film writer, screenwriter, worked in Hollywood for a while, did a number of really low-paying, odd acting jobs, supported myself any way I could. The problem was I was not a very good screenwriter. I was really, really horrible at it, actually. So making a living was always a struggle. And supported myself working in restaurants a lot, bartending, did a stint as a firefighter for a while. And my wife and I, we moved to Seattle, great city in the Pacific Northwest. And I got a job working in a restaurant again, and the economy was terrible. This was 2008, 2009. And it was really hard to even get that job. And again, it was kind of like my telemarketing experience years earlier. I worked 3 days, and I said, I just can't do this anymore. And I spoke with my wife, and I said, I know the economy is horrible. I know that, this job, we really need the money, but I'm going to quit, and I'm going to go into the internet. And I had been learning, teaching myself how to build, websites, HTML, CSS. And I knew I wanted to do something working online, building websites. And that's how I got my start. I borrowed money from everybody I knew. I sat down with books at night and I read how to build websites with HTML, CSS, and I learned CMS. And I spent like 6 months just doing this. And I built my first website. It was for students where they can find student discounts. And it was an affiliate model. I would earn money if people click certain links. But after I finished this website, I realized I had no idea how to get people to visit the website.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, I have to go back. I have to learn marketing now. And I had no idea what to do. I was looking at AdWords. I was looking at, paid advertising models. And then I stumbled upon this thing called SEO. And this was 2009, and SEO was still just taking off. It was still a new industry to a lot of people, and it opened my eyes. This was amazing to me. For some guy who used to do telemarketing, now all we had to do was figure out what people were looking for, and they were already looking for it. And all you had to do was put yourself in front of them at the exact moment that they were looking for it, and your job was done as long as you had a quality product. It was amazing. It was pull marketing instead of push marketing. And I thought SEO was the most amazing thing ever, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah, and that's interesting. That's very similar to how I fell in love with SEO as well. And it came down to people were looking for these things. So it
Yeah.
wasn't just, it was the opposite of what your initial impression was of marketing. And that is that you have to sell somebody on something that they maybe don't want, or you need to use pressure. You need to use these tactics in order to get somebody interested in it. But no, not really. They're already interested, and you're just harvesting that demand. You're just finding people who are interested in being the best answer for them.
Exactly. It was so serendipitous. You're actually helping people out. And the other thing that I loved about it was it leveled the playing field, because the internet is so democratic that I didn't have to pay for these results on a per click basis. I could just earn the results and nobody could stop me. It wasn't like screenwriting where someone had to pay me to publish a screenplay and turn it into a movie. I could publish anything I wanted on the web, and if it was great, people would come. And so it was fascinating.
That's a question that I have is, you had posted your previous jobs on Twitter before, and I'm looking at it right now, and it looks like I'm just estimating somewhere around 35 different jobs that you had before you got into the internet marketing area. And a lot of those were physical labor, or labor that involved, not in front of a computer. And in fact, actually just looking at this, one of the first times that you were in front of a computer was when you decided, as you said, to become a marketer, to become, interested in SEO and in affiliate programs. So that's an interesting transition, and I don't think that a lot of people experience in their careers.
I didn't even have a computer most of the time I was growing up and in college and post-college. A computer was something I went to an internet cafe for and tried to figure out how to use the printer. So it wasn't until the mid-2000s, I bought a pretty cheap PC, and at that time you could start to get online and have a pretty decent experience. But I was not a computer person by any stretch of the imagination.
So you weren't at all a computer person, didn't have a computer, and then you just made this decision, I'm getting into it anyway.
Yeah, I was a writer, though. All that work doing screenwriter. Even though I wasn't a very good screenwriter, I still learned a lot of good writing skills. So I felt I had good communication skills that sort of led me down that path. And I don't know how I ended up building websites with my CSS and HTML and Dreamweaver back in the day, but it all just it started to click for me.
I mean, that's how a lot of us get started in an absence of a formal education program to get us there, right? Like you went to film school, not computer science school, or not school on marketing degrees and things like that. So I think that's where a lot of people have to fill in the gaps on their own. So they need to start somewhere, and you sort of become self-taught in what you're doing.
Yeah, and this is what made the transition for me. And this is actually how I got my first marketing job, because I did not consider myself a marketer at this point. My wife was actually working for a company here in Seattle. They were a wholesaler. They had a website, but it wasn't very good. It wasn't a big part of their business. It was just something that obviously was just thrown up. And I was studying SEO at the time, and I looked at the website and I saw some really obvious ways that they could improve their visibility. So I asked my wife if they would, introduce me to her boss, and I sat down and I had a meeting with him and said, "Hey, look, here's 10 things you can do that will help you out." And at the end of the meeting, he said, "Great, how much money do you want?" And I'm like, "Oh no, you don't want me to do this. I don't do this for a living. I'm just learning it." And he's like, "Well, you know more than I do, so I'd like to hire you." And that was how I got my first SEO job. I became a consultant on that day. And, I didn't know everything that I was doing, but I started learning, and I sort of stumbled into being an SEO consultant, and that's how it started.
Yeah, so the aha moment for you, it sounds like, was people are willing to pay you for your expertise, and even if you don't consider yourself to be the foremost expert, which I think a lot of us don't consider ourselves to be an expert in everything, the key thing here is that you knew more than they did. And as long as you know more than they do, and as long as you're open with that and honest about that, then there's opportunity. And there's opportunity not only to have immediate impact, but also long-term value as well.
Yeah, and in all fairness, the job did not pay that well, but that was fine because I was learning so much. And then that job referred me to so many other small businesses in the Seattle area. And pretty soon I found I was actually pretty busy with client work. So it really worked out well.
Yeah, that's great. And that's really what I think a lot of people that are trying to get into this industry, they might think about money first. They might think about getting paid to do these things. But if you listen to almost anybody's origin story who is successful and has the job that you want to be in, it's never about money right away. And sometimes it's never about money, but a lot of times it's just about getting that experience and working either free or cheaply in order to get to where you want to be. And I know I did that myself. I worked for a solid year, barely getting any money until I was able to start getting paid for it. But eventually that became a really good thing.
There's two situations which really improve your value. If you deliver results to a client, you become so much more valuable to them. Sometimes you can raise your rates, immediately. The other, once you're recommended, once that client recommends you to somebody else, you're worth so much more because you're a trusted person and you don't have to prove yourself. So those two scenarios really help.
Yeah, it's tremendous. You're right. The recommendations and the referrals and when people start to talking and helping you out, that's really where you start to shine. And when you really start to see this isn't just a side gig, this is a career or an option for a career. That's exhilarating to see that, right? To go from, hey, I had 35 jobs and I maybe wasn't sure that any of these were the right thing for me. It seems like right when you had that clicking moment, it went from just being another job to being a career for you.
Yeah, definitely was. And one thing that I always focused on was delivering results. And I think that helped tremendously. Instead of just a lot of people look at a consultancy and they think, well, I'm delivering deliverables. I hate the word deliverables. It's my least favorite word in English language. Because that means you're just delivering a paper or a list of recommendations. And I don't think that's enough to really succeed. You actually have to show the value to the client, that their sales have increased or you've affected change in their industry or things are working better for them. And that's what's going to push you over the top.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, you had mentioned that, at the beginning how you started out in Iowa and then you said you moved to California and then up to Seattle. How much do you think location had to do with your success here? Was it because you were in an area that I'd say Seattle's fairly well known for a good SEO community? Does that make an impact here? Or is it more just sort of timing? Or is it all of those things?
In my case, location was everything, but I'll get to that part of the story in a second. But I don't think location has to be a determining factor. I've traveled to really small towns. I know SEOs who work in very small communities, and there's always businesses that need marketing help. They need online visibility. Sometimes you have to customize your services a little different, but I think you can succeed in almost any environment. In my case, however, Seattle played a huge role because of the other companies that were here. And do you mind if I tell this part of the story now, how I transitioned into working for Moz?
Yeah, I have a question. What's the smartest move you ever made? And that might be it right there. So let's get into it. How did you end up working with Moz?
So at this point of the story, I would consider myself a small-time SEO consultant. I have a few clients, but I don't know how to charge appropriately at this point. And I happen to be doing a search online about how much SEOs should charge. And if you know SEO at all, you know that SEO Moz or SEO Moz back in the day is one of the biggest names in the space. And I clicked on a Google search result about SEO and what people were getting paid. And it was actually a job description. And Moz, which is located in Seattle, they build SEO software. They were hiring support specialists. And I loved Moz. And I wasn't sure that I wanted to take a phone support job because that seemed like a step down from what I was doing at the time, which was actual client work. But I loved Moz so much, and I was a fan of Rand Fishkin and Jen Lopez and Sarah Bird, people that I was reading on the blog every day, learning SEO, that I decided to apply, and I interviewed, and a couple months later, I was working at my dream company. So that transition was working for the right company, even though it was not necessarily the job I wanted. That was the smartest thing I've ever done.
Yeah. So that's curious. Like I want to get into your mindset when you're doing this, though. It sounds like what did you expect to come out of this? Like, obviously, you like SEO. You're located very close to one of the most regarded SEO companies in the entire world, I guess you could say. And you're like, okay, I'm good at SEO. Here's an SEO company. I'm going to go take a job not doing SEO necessarily, or doing a job that's there.
Yeah.
What was your scheme at the end of this thing? What did you want to get out of it?
I have to be honest with you. I don't know if I thought that far ahead. I just knew that I wanted to work at SEO Moz. I have to admit, SEO Moz was a good place to work. When I was a consultant, you know, there are certain things you have to deal with, such as insurance and, employee savings that are sort of hard to do when you're first starting out as a consultant. And I wasn't very good at those things. SEO Moz took care of all that for me. It was the trade-off of having a full-time job with benefits, but mostly it was an amazing work experience. Working with SEOs every day, helping them solve problems, working with the software, recording Whiteboard Fridays. It was just going from a single person to working in a group was a pretty significant transition for me because it was the right group of people.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good point to make as well, is that the individual, being a consultant can be a lonely world sometimes. And depending on where you are in your career and where you are in your confidence, it can be a little bit difficult to overcome. And that is all the things like insurance, but then even simple things like having peers, having people you can bounce ideas off of, having water cooler conversations, things like that. And I think that is definitely a factor we should incorporate when you consider the moves you make. I know I have a similar story, and that is I was on my own for a good 2 years, and then I went over with an agency called 3 Deep and joined them because I wanted that interaction, and I wanted to know that I could grow something bigger. I was worried about being able to grow something large on my own, but I knew that if I had a team with me and equally smart people who were really brilliant at what they did, then it would be a bigger product in the end. It'd be sum of all parts is much bigger than I could have done on my own.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Sometimes you just need that connection for a while, and you want to get a sense of what those skills are, and then you can take them with you anywhere.
Yeah, excellent. That's great, and I think that's really an inspiring story, is that you can picture what you want to be your end game, or at least a midterm game, or somewhere along the lines where you see yourself being, and then what will get you there. And you made a decision that seems to have made a really strong difference for you.
Yeah, and here's where it became very serendipitous. 3 or 4 months after I started at SEO Moz, they had a job opening for the lead SEO for SEO Moz. It was the person doing SEO for SEO Moz, and there was a big debate if they wanted to hire a big name in the industry externally or if they wanted to hire from within. And someone had said, hey, Cyrus does SEO, let's give him a try. And so 3 or 4 months after joining the company, I'm now doing SEO for the biggest name in SEO, arguably in the world. So, and at that point, my mind was blown. I'm like, how am I worthy of this job? And it was an amazing transition. And before I knew it, I was the SEO for SEO Moz. So that's where it got interesting.
Yeah, that's got to be thrilling and a little bit scary, right? Like obviously in your timeline, you were pretty new to this. How long were you into SEO?
I had been doing SEO about a year and a half at that point. So if I was hiring for the role, I would never hire me. I got very lucky getting into the role. And I'll be honest, Jeff, I had imposter syndrome. Because having watched people like Danny Dover, people that had taught me SEO, and now I'm in charge of this site, I'm in charge of teaching other people SEO, I often had nights where I thought, they're going to find out that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm going to get fired. I would log on, and I'd have trouble logging into our Google Analytics account. And I'd think, oh no, they kicked me out, they fired me.
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm in, no, it's okay.
But in the end, you delivered, right? I mean, even though you were like, I don't know how I can handle this, and I think a lot of us are like over our heads and wondering how we're going to go, but you delivered. Yeah. You delivered not only what they wanted you to, but you've taken that company, or you've taken their website to a whole nother level.
Well, thank you. I certainly can't take all that credit. It's a huge team and a lot of work, but I think I did okay. I decided that I made a decision right from the beginning that if I was going to be in this role, I was going to own it, and I was going to make, the decisions the way I wanted to make them. And I had a lot of help. We have connections to some of the best SEOs in the world here, so I wasn't going to stray too far off course, but I like to think I did a good job. I truthfully carried that imposter syndrome with me for quite a while. And a lot of people don't know this, I ended up leaving Moz for a short time after that because I think I was a little stressed out. I didn't think I could do it. And I ended up joining another startup here in Seattle for about 18 months before coming back to Moz and taking the reins again. But today, looking back, I'm very proud of what we've accomplished here. And Yeah, I think I've done okay, but
Yeah.
I help.
Well, I think that's good to know, is that, landing the dream job doesn't always end everything for you. It's not always the end all be all. Sometimes it can actually create complications that you don't even perceive, things that you're not even sure about. And so going out and getting other experiences just to see whether you had the right thing or not is good. And you're very fortunate that you were able to do that and then come back and to get into that area as well.
I think, and that's a totally different conversation, but something I think is becoming more prominent in technology companies. The average time that someone works in a technology company in Seattle is 2.5 years before they move on to a different job. I think the days when you hang on to your employees forever are gone. But one thing I'd love to see is that when I did leave, Moz did accept me back. And I was actually a better employee and was able to contribute more to the company because I left. And I think that's awesome. I'd love to see a situation where it's perfectly fine for your employees to leave after 2 or 3 years and go get other experiences because maybe they don't have that growth track within your company. And then when they come back, they can often come back at a much higher level because they've had different experiences. I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, I think that I agree. I think that you see it within companies, especially large companies. They might let you do a rotation or let you try something new, cross-train. But within smaller companies, a lot of times it's very hesitant to, if you're gone, you're sort of gone. So it's great that they were able to do that for you. And it's good to hear, I think everybody should hear what you just said, is that you're better off because of it. Moz is better off because of it. You're better off because of it.
Yeah, I learned so much in my time in those 18 months working for another startup, and I was able to bring those skills back to Moz. And Moz grew during that time, and I grew during that time, and I was able to step into a much higher position with a much higher level of responsibility than I was before. So it worked out great.
That's great. Obviously, SEO is your thing, and it's clicking with you. How do you stay current? How do you keep on learning this now that I think in title you've achieved a very, you're sort of at the top and the pinnacle of SEO jobs out there. How do you keep on challenging yourself? How do you keep on delivering, and what keeps you excited?
So I think there's 3 things that are key to at least my learning, but it could apply to everybody. One is definitely doing the job for Moz itself. We have a lot of properties such as Follower Wonk, Open Site Explorer that we just incorporated, Moz itself. We're launching new products all the time. So there's a lot of stuff in the job that I have to keep up on SEO. But the second part is teaching other people. And that's a big part of what we do here. And so I'm constantly reading everything on Twitter, everything that's published on inbound.org or other places. We're curating a newsletter that we send to people. We're making the Whiteboard Fridays. I think when you start to teach people SEO or teach people whatever skill it is, it makes you learn it at a much deeper level. So I'm really lucky here that part of my job is teaching other people some of my skills, which gives me a much better depth of the skill itself. And the third point is I often learn more from my side projects than I learn from doing anything on the job, because I still do affiliate marketing on the side. I run a number of personal blogs, and I'm allowed to do more there because I don't have to account for the risk involved. And so I think everybody should have side projects that they learn from.
Couldn't agree more. I've learned almost everything I've learned from side projects as well, or projects where I just don't. The pressure's not there, right? It's not as mission critical if you make a change to a site you own or an affiliate site, if you make an experiment, than it is if you do it for clients or for the people who are expecting that revenue to come in. So I couldn't agree more that side projects are really valuable.
Yeah, side projects are, when we change things here at Moz, it's often I have to write a brief. I have to submit it to the engineers. It's often a 3-month process, and you need to get it right. Where if you're just playing around on your personal blog, it's just a few keystrokes, and you can see the next day if it made a change or not. And there's some freedom in that, and you can often take what you learn and apply it to your larger job or your client work. And you can learn things. You can iterate so quickly on your personal projects that you can stay ahead of the competition. You can learn things that no one else is talking about. It's a lot of fun.
For SEO, do you think you get better results, or are they not? Is it negligible difference between a long development cycle and a long cycle where you need to spend 3 months to prepare something out there versus if you are nimble? Is there a first actor advantage in SEO that you found?
That's a good question. I think there's 2 aspects I like to divide that in terms of content strategy and technical SEO. I think because content is so important for SEO, I think you need a long-term strategy for that. You need to know what you're producing. You need to be dedicated to it, and you need a long-term plan to produce quality content. The technical SEO side changes really quickly, and you can iterate really fast. You know, your architecture, your code, your crawling structure. So I think there's two different worlds there. It's important to work both fast and slow in SEO.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and I think that's the companies that do the best at SEO. It seems like have adopted a regular content strategy where they're publishing at a certain amount of time. They're holding themselves to standards, and they are going through the process of creating content regularly, and it's usually very high quality and in depth as well.
Yeah. We have at Moz, we try to publish one blog post every day, Monday through Friday, and that discipline is very beneficial to us. It creates structure people expect to post. But on the other hand, quality is so much more important, and if a day comes by that we don't have something quality or if it's questionable, we just won't publish that day. And I think in today's world where people are discovering their content more through social media and sharing and less through actually visiting blogs themselves or through an RSS feed, that model actually works pretty well.
Yeah, I think it does work well, and that's interesting to see. So you had mentioned this to me before, but you're always looking for content on Moz and high quality. Are there really times where you don't have a high quality post that that you'd maybe pick something from the community or be looking for people to contribute?
Yeah, I mean, life happens. I mean, the best of plans sometimes get waylaid, and we usually have our content scheduled 2 to 3 weeks in advance, but we're also a real world company. We're launching products. Sometimes products are delayed. Sometimes an author falls through. We have our UMoz post, which is community supplied content. Oftentimes we're able to promote a worthy post up into the Moz blog. Other times the quality just isn't there. And if it's not, the thing about content is you're demanding your audience's attention. And that is the most valuable thing you have if you have an audience, is their attention. And you don't want to waste it on anything that is not worthy. And a lot of people just post stuff thinking, hey, let's get some eyeballs on this and maybe we'll sell a few subscriptions, but you're risking the trust of your audience. You're risking losing your authority, and we don't want to do that. So if it's not there, we won't publish.
Yeah, and that's a great advice, and I think that's how a lot of us should approach our own strategy with our own content, as well as if we're looking to guest post. I think that I've guest posted a few times on the Moz blog, and it's given me exposure that I would never be able to have on my own, just because of the audience that's built in. But also at the same time, with that exposure, I have to say something important. I have to say something that people want, and I have to deliver my best work. That's really the only way that arrangement works out. So I know a lot of people ask me, how do you get onto Moz? And it's really have something that's in your eyes better quality than what you already see on Moz. That's the only surefire way to get there. But if your articles aren't good enough, then don't bother, because it's not really going to help you out, and you might get upset that you didn't make it there.
Yeah, and Jeff, that's why we love having you on Moz. I wish we had you on Moz more. Little plug there. Because you deliver, you understand great content. I think one of my biggest pet peeves is we see blogs that accept guest posts, and the guest post kind of sucks, or it's not as good as what the regular author has on there. And I understand the temptation. We want content. It's hard to publish every day or a few times a month. And so, hey, let's open it up to guest post, and we'll find some people in the community and we'll publish, and it's just not as good. And then when you start to go down that road, you start to lose your audience. You start to lose their trust, and it's just not what you want to do.
Yeah, and audience building is a tough thing. I mean, I had a question in here about how do you build your personal brand, and I think that for all of us, right, it's building an audience, it's building a brand, but that's an ongoing dynamic thing. You need to be consistent. You need to have quality, and you need to give people what they want, what they expect from you. Yeah,
and it's you earn that reputation every day. Once you have your audience, you have to continually be worthy of that attention. And if you're not, you'll lose it. It's kind of like a fool and his money are soon parted, and a bad content marketer and their audience are soon parted as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Someone should write that down.
Yes, that'll be our quote of the day for this for this interview. So I want to go back to one thing that you had mentioned, the second thing that you really enjoy about your job, and that is teaching, because that's really important to me as well. And you said something that really hit home to me, and that is, by teaching, even if you don't consider yourself the foremost authority on something, by teaching somebody else what you've learned and by trying to abstract it and explain it in a way that everybody can understand, you learn so much more intimately the content you're talking about. The level of understanding that you get by teaching, even if it's not the best lesson plan, or even if you don't think you should be teaching, it is such experience. It's such a eye-opening experience to be able to do that. And so I want to make sure that everybody realizes that even if you are just learning, teaching somebody else what you learned is really important to do.
Yeah, you get so much out of, both people get so much out of it. And there's always opportunities. I have an audience, right? I can go on Whiteboard Friday and reach tens of thousands of people, but I can also go down and talk to my engineers on the floor below me, and I have an audience of 2, and the challenge is exactly the same, whether it's 2 people or 20,000 people, distilling your ideas into ways that other people understand. And it's SEO, marketing in general. It's hard to understand, whether you're dealing with, AdWords or, content analytics or SEO. These are concepts that people, they think they understand or they sort of grasp, but if you get a chance to explain a small concept in detail, people are grateful for that, and you both benefit.
And the thing that's really interesting about it is even the size of the audience does make a difference. So you said if you publish a Whiteboard Friday video, you get 20,000 plus views on that. But then if you talk to your 2 engineers, think about all the millions of people who, if you told them about how to improve Open Site Explorer, for example, to be more in line with an SEO, that's actually a much bigger impact potentially, even though it doesn't seem like much. You're just talking to 2 people. If you could change or add a killer feature to the product or something that really makes something better, you're going to have a long-lasting impact. So I think we all try to get immediate impact out of the teaching we do, and because of that, we'd rather focus on something that's near-term or more of a sure thing. But teaching has such a valuable for years to come. Something that you taught today might actually pay off 20,000 times in the long run if you do it the right way.
Yeah, and from a personal note, as an in-house SEO, teaching SEO to other people in-house makes my job so much easier. My favorite thing is when an engineer will catch something first or do a 301 redirect without me having to intervene, because they just know that's the right thing to do. And I'm like, yes. You can't see it because this is like a podcast, but I'm fist pumping in the air right now.
Nice. Yeah, that's the same thing. As I remember that as well. Like even when we were doing campaign tracking for our campaigns, when I finally taught everybody that they needed to ask me for a campaign code or just some kind of tracking code before they launched a campaign, when they'd call me first or fix it themselves, whatever it was, that was always the sense of accomplishment, because you can't be on every single call. You can't be on every email. You can't be involved with every single aspect. You really need to help and empower other people to get there as well. That's how you scale. That's how we scale this, right? That's how we scale our knowledge and scale our impact.
And one thing I want to say about teaching is a philosophy we have here at Moz, that Rand Fishkin, the founder, really started, is that you can never actually give all your knowledge away. There's no point in trying to hide knowledge or hold something back out of competitive advantage. We here at Moz, anything that we know, we put on the blog, we teach people, we talk about it, and the only thing that does is make you seem like a bigger authority. It makes you more valuable. A lot of people worry that they're going to empower other people too much and they will be out of a job, but in reality, that never, ever happened. Teaching is hard, and you'll never actually give away all your knowledge because it's impossible to take everything that's in your brain and put it in a blog post or on paper. But the more you give away, the more power you have.
Absolutely. And I call it the bigger pie mentality. And what that means to me is the pie is always going to get bigger as long as the world grows and as long as the GDP of the world keeps on going up, as long as there's a decent economy. We're not taking away from other people. We're actually adding to the overall pie. So the size of the pie gets bigger. You might get a little bit smaller piece, but percentage-wise, but overall, it's more valuable to be there. And so I think that that's absolutely the mentality that all marketers should take, in my opinion, is a bigger pie approach. And that is, we're going after making this bigger. That's what marketing is. Marketing is about finding a market, a product market fit for whatever you're selling, for whatever you're trying to get people interested in. And so getting a bigger market is the only real way to succeed at marketing. It's not to take away from other people's market. It's to grow it.
Yep, I agree 100%. Even in SEO, we see search growing. Google grows its search volume still today, 15 to 20% a year, because more people are making more searches. It just means there's more opportunity all around.
Well, that's a good transition point, because I want to know, talking about where you're at today. So we got through that journey. You're obviously doing really well. How do you stay current? How do you, if Google's growing significantly every year and it's growing at this exponential rate still in 2015, how do you stay current?
Well, despite the growth, there are still so many changes taking place. Technology is changing. Everybody talks about mobile. We've been talking about mobile for 6 years, but now it's at a real inflection point where there's just more screens. People are making more purchases on mobile, which is something we haven't seen before. Even Moz Pro, people are buying on mobile, which is really strange to us because we have odd tools that don't really work well on mobile. So keeping up with those changes, the move towards more secure websites, keeping up with those changes is so important to us. Focusing on user experiences more than the technical SEO. Even though I've been doing this for 6 years now, which I realize isn't that long compared to a lot of the titans in the industry, it still feels like I have so much to learn. I've never finished optimizing the sites that I work on. There's always new opportunities, and I've never really seen any page, website experience that couldn't be doubled in traffic if you found a new angle or the right angle to apply certain techniques to it. So there's always new challenges, and that's why it's always exciting to me. And even talking to you, I'm thinking about things that I want to go work on right now that I'm excited about. So that's what keeps it fresh for me. It's exciting seeing things go up and to the right.
At each phase of your career and each phase of getting into SEO and just digital marketing in general, there's certain milestones that we hit that we think that's the end of it, right? So maybe 1 year into it, it's to be able to recite what a robots.txt file should look like by the end of the first year or something like that. And then by the second year, it's to be able to know domain authorities for all your competitors. I'm just giving some examples of things that are milestones. Like, I can recite that off the top of my head. I could define to an audience of 1,000 people exactly what this is and what I do. But then you realize, there's so much more to it. And then in a couple of years, you need to keep on learning things. And then 6 years into it, where you are, there's still things to learn. There's still things to do. And there's still those. I mean, there's the low hanging fruit. I always talk about that concept of the little things we can do today that are going to make a big impact. There's still low hanging fruit 6 years into it, 10 years into it, 20 years into it, because this is an ongoing process. Whenever you execute your plan, you have other things coming in. If you're publishing content every day, then you need to SEO that new content. You need to get it all to fit together. You need to adjust your site's infrastructure in order to accommodate for all this new content that you have. So there's always a challenge that's out there. And really, it's even if you know everything about SEO, it's implementing it. It's making sure that that's there. And then it's trying to outdo yourself. And that's one thing I wanted to ask you about is I've seen, on Twitter, sometimes you post stats about year over year blog growth with Moz. And I personally would have thought, how do you grow this anymore? It's already achieved it. So it's interesting to see. Can you share some of those results of how much it's still growing to this day?
Yeah. So I ask us the same question, Jeff. I mean, how big have grown so much from back when it started in 2004 to a handful of visitors a day to now well over 100,000 visitors every day and growing. And, millions of visits a month. I'm like, how big can we get? I mean, we already dominate the SEO landscape. And so I'm always trying to deliver lower expectations. I'm like Scotty on the Enterprise, where I tell Captain Kirk it's going to take 4 days to fix when really it's going to take 2. Because I'm not sure myself how much we can keep growing. Traditionally, it hasn't been uncommon for us to see 50% year over year increases. Which I think is pretty significant. Lately, this year was actually our worst year for growth. that there was a number of contributing factors to that. Most of them internal. We had some internal mistakes. We changed our navigation, so that hurt our SEO in certain ways. We switched over to HTTPS, and we botched a few things on there. And also, Moz itself has been very slow to adopt to mobile. But we try to practice what we preach, so we've been making those transitions, but we've been slow. And I just ran numbers for August, and our August growth was only 9% year over year. So it's possible we're slowing down, but we are still growing. So I'm hopeful for that.
Well, now you have some new challenges to overcome and some new things to work on as well.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about the future. And the thing for me is at Moz, we have such a large top of funnel, with million plus visitors a year. We don't actually need to grow our funnel that much larger. We don't really push people into a free trial. I think our opportunities are more with a product market fit. We have the audience. We just need to, if we want to grow ourselves as a business, we need to make sure that we're delivering the products that they want to buy. And I think that's, as a business, our challenge is not SEO or the size of our audience. It's the product market fit.
Yeah, and that's always an ongoing thing. It's always an ever-going struggle to have a product that people want and to find it. And so it's a good lesson that even when you are established and doing quite well, there's always room to improve, and there's always the competing factors that you're working against, and that is the environment, that's other products, that's just the interest in the industry as a whole.
Yep, and I just like marketing, number of Google searches are growing. Marketing is growing too. Moz is becoming a company that's more about SEO. We're into local. We have follower wonk. We're launching actually a content product in a couple months that's going to help people do site audits and measure their content marketing efforts. So we're trying to grow with the industry as marketing grows.
I think that's a good change to go from SEO Moz to Moz. It's more encompassing and working on getting to where people want to be.
Yeah, and let's be honest, we changed the name because no one could say the old name. My mom called it SEO Moz. What is that SEO Moz? And that actually, what a lot of people don't realize, that actually hurt us in the short term. When we switched our name from SEO Moz to Moz, when we switched domains, our SEO traffic dropped about 30%. Normally, you'd expect a drop of about 15%, but because we changed our name and all of our branding, that added to it. So it was a significant cost to us to make that change, but in the long run, it's really paid off.
Yeah, that's a good lesson as well, is that sometimes, the short-term expectations, even if you do worse, you can still turn it around. You can still improve on things.
Yeah, and that would be hard to sell to most businesses. Like, hey, you're going to make this change and you're going to take a 30% hit this year. A lot of business would never do that, but the long-term thinking was in 5 or 10 years, we're going to be 1,000 times bigger because of it. It takes bravery, and I think our leadership team was brave to make that decision.
Yeah, I think it's a brave decision, but it's the right one, and now it's just seamless in the end. It's funny how things work, but it's just Moz now. When we say SEO Moz, it reminds me of a past time, a time that's in the rearview mirror, and so the change has gone through.
Interesting trivia. It's been 2.5 years since we made the switch. About 25 to 30% of our search traffic searching for Moz is actually searching for SEO Moz. Still today.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yep. I think for some people it will never change. So, all right. Well, I think we've learned quite a bit about the journey, and I really think it's fascinating. So what I want to leave us with is, what advice do you have for somebody who's a new marketer getting into this? Obviously, your story was very inspirational and some really good advice there, but is there any way you'd boil that down into something you'd recommend for somebody who wants to transition into this industry or just want to get into it in the first place?
I think about where all my success has come from, and it was all about not selling myself, but trying to deliver results. I think that the focus that I had on results, I never really cared about salary that much. I never cared about, you mentioned I had 30 jobs. I was never really worried about what my next job was or what my next title was. I just kind of was interested in making needles move. And I think when people see that in you, they want to give you more needles to move. So, focus on results. That's it.
Well, I think that we all should focus on the results, right? Not worrying about title or compensation in the short term, because that will work itself out in the end if you get a reputation for delivering.
I think you need to worry about that stuff. It needs to be recognized. You need to stand up for yourself and make sure you're being paid appropriately and all that. But that can come second in a lot of times.
Yep, exactly. And you got to look at the contract, the social contract you have with the person you're talking to. If they're giving you a chance, then you shouldn't risk that by asking for more than they're willing to give you. Understand your situation, and then things will come. And that's really the important thing to realize here is, yes, you should always fight for yourself and fight for your compensation. You just need to do it after you've given something as a result. My advice is always, and this is advice that I've received over the years, and that's stay close to the stream of revenue. If you're in a job that helps make money for your company, then you can get a little bit bigger piece of that money. I was just reading an article yesterday about this, and they said that if you want to make $5 million or something like that, just let's just take an arbitrary number, then you need to have generated $50 million for other people. That's really what you got to look at, is by generating a lot of money for other people, you'll increase your share and be able to increase more of it. And I think that's a really good way of looking at things. If you give value to your company, and they'll give you value back.
Yeah, that is amazing advice, Jeff. I'm going to use that myself. The closer you get to the revenue stream, the people who are, if you can show how your actions influence that revenue stream, that's just gold.
Excellent. Well, I think that's a good point to leave us at. I really appreciate your time today, Cyrus. It's been excellent. Any closing thoughts?
No, Jeff, it's always good talking to you. I hope we get a chance to talk more, and I want to subscribe to this podcast.
What an awesome story that was. Cyrus goes from not even owning a computer to being the SEO for Moz within 2 years. Now, you might just call this lucky, but I think that he made a critical step to ensure that success. He swallowed his pride, went after opportunity, and then just a few short years later, Cyrus was an internationally renowned speaker, all-around good guy, and as you heard from him, he's growing the traffic at the Moz blog, him and his team there, because of the techniques that he's learned. So it didn't take very long for him, once he committed that decision, to see some amazing results. And as he said, it's all about the results. I just wanted to share a story with you, even though we're towards the end of the podcast. It just because I love origin stories. This is a similar origin story. It reminds me of the one of podcasting icon Adam Carolla and how he got started in show business. So I know Adam Carolla is a controversial figure, and people either love or hate him, but hear me out. There's a really good lesson to be learned here. So Adam Carolla was a construction worker. He didn't really have much going for him. He was a funny guy, but just to his friends. Like, nobody really knew he was funny outside of his few friends that heard him, and he made them laugh. So realizing that construction was not what he wanted for his life, he started taking improv classes, and he did it at the Groundlings, which is in LA, and he also taught boxing lessons in his spare time. So fast forward a couple of years, and there's this radio host in LA who was challenged to a boxing match by another radio personality. So Adam's listening to the radio during his construction job and thought it was the perfect opportunity to make a new contact. So he drove to the radio station and offered to train the personality on how to box free of charge. He made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and obviously the personality accepted and took some free boxing lessons from Adam Carolla in preparation for this event. So after a few weeks of training, this guy, the personality, is like, hey, you're funny. You're more than just boxing. You know, you're a pretty cool guy. And he invited him to be funny on the radio. And so Adam learned that he actually had a voice for radio, and he eventually became a featured member of the show, all because of these boxing lessons that he offered for free. And the funny thing is, guess who that radio personality was? It was actually Jimmy Kimmel. So over the years, as a lot of you probably know, Adam started to receive more and more roles because of it. With his friendship with Jimmy, they got roles, and they created a TV show together, and they've been friends ever since, like really, really good friends, all because of what Adam Carolla did, because he went out of his way to meet this person. Today, Adam's a very successful media personality. Even if you don't like what he has to say, he's a very successful media personality, and he's done a really good job at that. And so it's all about that hustle, right? So the moral of the story of both Cyrus and Adam is that you need to create your own luck. You can't just look at Cyrus and Adam and say, oh, those people are lucky. They're lucky, right place, right time. But what I see there is hustle. It wasn't just luck. They saw the desire for something more, and then they committed to making it happen. And we should all be so bold. That's it for our episode today. Go to Jeffalytics.com/Cyrus for show notes, for links to subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher, and for an archive of all of our episodes. And please leave a review while you're at it. No reviews came in over the past week, which makes me really sad. If you like this podcast, then help others discover the best kept secret in digital marketing. And I'll see you next week.